Well, today is the 4th anniversary of that glorious day in our history when we officially left the European Union. Opinions will continue to be divided on whether we're better or worse off out of the European Union. I was a Brexiteer, proud Brexiteer. Beverly was not, but she's now says...
Seen the light.
Exactly. But we're now going to talk to Mr Brexit himself, our very own Nigel Farage. Nigel, happy anniversary day to you. It should have been a lot better than it is, frankly, shouldn't it?
Well, let's just remember, that 4 years ago today at 11 p.m, we left the European Union, and I was there with a huge party in Parliament Square.
I was there.
And it was something to celebrate, because, you see, it wasn't just, was it, the referendum? It was the attempt over the next few years by almost the entirety of the British establishment to overturn that result. So the fact we got over the line on that day is something to celebrate. And if we look at what's happening across the European Union right now, well, it's a basket case. I mean, they're at each other's throats on migration. We've got Euroscepticism growing across the whole of Europe, and some really pretty extreme parties of right and left doing well. Are we better off out? Undoubtedly. For those that cast doubt on the economics of it, well, of course there are some inconveniences. When you change things, there always are. But just looking at the GDP figures, you can see that actually since 2016 we've done better than France and Germany and Italy. But the disappointment is this. Whether Boris Johnson really believed in Brexit or really understood Brexit, I don't suppose we'll ever know. But what we can say with some certainty is that the Conservative Party that took office with an 80-seat majority in 2019, the party as a whole didn't believe in Brexit. They never understood it. They viewed it as a damage limitation exercise rather than an opportunity. And they have done precious little over the course of the last 4 years to move us away from European Union rules, to make life easier for men and women running small businesses in this country. And on the really big one of controlling our borders and reducing immigration, which is why we had the huge turnout in 2016, it has been a complete and utter breach of trust and faith. So delighted we left, historically the right thing to do, but it's not been delivered.
So we're talking January 2020, then of course March 2020, the world completely lost its mind and we went into these completely non-scientific lockdowns. So they would say, I suppose, Nigel, in their defence, we were faced with something bigger than Brexit, so that their hands were tied to some degree. Do you buy that?
Well, hang on, the whole of Whitehall, every single civil servant wasn't involved with lockdown. I mean, most of them were lounging at home doing nothing. The whole of government, the whole of government, every government minister wasn't, hands-on with the pandemic. And let's face it, all of this ended a long time ago. Was the pandemic a problem? Of course it was. Did we make mistakes? Yes, of course we did. Some of them perhaps will prove to be long-term historic mistakes. But none of that gets away. None of that gets away from the fact that you go out there now, you stop people on the street in any town in this country running their own business, and you ask them, has life become easier in the last 4 years? And they'll probably tell you that in many ways the regulations have got tougher. And that's the real sense of disappointment. And isn't it funny? The French Prime Minister yesterday was in the Assemblée Nationale talking about Frexit. France mustn't leave the European Union. The leader of the AfD in Germany now wants a referendum on whether Germany should leave the European Union. The only country in which there seems to be a debate saying how wonderful the EU is are the Remainers who never give up in this country.
And Nigel, you talk about that impact on small businesses, maybe medium-sized businesses. Is that the failure of the government, of the Tory government, to deliver its pledge to abolish so many of these cumbersome rules and regulations? I heard Kemi Badenoch talking about it on GBNews at the weekend. They've got rid of so many, but there are thousands more still in place.
Well after the last lockdown, and this is important, Bev, well after the last lockdown, there was a proposal to get rid of thousands of EU rules. Rishi Sunak was elected. Well, he didn't get elected, but subsequently when Truss resigned, he promised in his leadership bid that he'd get rid of thousands of EU rules. once he became Prime Minister, he dropped that pledge. And let's see what comes at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Let's see what's in that deal with Northern Ireland. You see, if the DUP are happy, there may well be a promise from Sunak that we will not break away any further from EU rules. So it is all a huge disappointment, and it's going to lead, of course, to a catastrophic Conservative loss at the next election, and a Labour Party already pledged to take us closer back towards European Union rules. It is all very disappointing, but the important thing is the constitutional break has been made. We're out, we're not going back, and in time, everyone will realise the benefit.
If you're going to remain a thorn in the side of Keir Starmer if he becomes Prime Minister Nigel Farage, you're better placed to do that, are you not, if you are standing as a candidate and reformer, you're sat in that House of Commons?
No, better off in GB News.
Well, I mean, there's a very good debate there, and in fact, the two of you have just put it forwards, haven't you? I mean, one is that, with GB News and with a huge social media following, that, I can exert considerable influence. The other is I can be in the House of Commons, and twice a year, if I'm lucky, I'll get to ask a 30-second question at Prime Minister's Questions. Right. It's a very, very difficult one to work out where I can be most effective. What I can promise you is that, having given up a quarter of a century of my life fighting for a political ideal that everybody thought was impossible, and in the early days virtually nobody other than me supported, I won't be giving up. That I can promise you.
OK. All right, Nigel. Great to see you. Nigel will be back on your TV at 7 o'clock tonight.